My peaceful morning rides with Thunder suddenly erupted into a neighborhood war when the HOA and, notably, Mrs. Davenport, decided horses simply didn't belong on public roads. Little did they know, however, that my quiet dad was about to be sworn in as the new mayor. What would you do if your HOA's power trip unexpectedly crashed into your family's surprising political influence? Comment below where you're watching from. The loud bang of Mrs. Davenport's front door slamming made Thunder jump beneath me. Predictably, there she stood in her pink fluffy bathrobe and hair rollers, her face twisted like she'd bitten into a lemon. "You stop right there," she screamed, pointing a bony finger directly at me. "That filthy animal doesn't belong on our streets." I pulled gently on Thunder's reins, bringing my beautiful chestnut quarter horse to a calm stop. "Good morning, Mrs. Davenport," I said, managing a smile that actually hurt my cheeks. "Beautiful day for a ride, isn't it?" Thunder snorted softly, as if agreeing with me. Truthfully, we'd been doing the same ride through Willow Creek Estates for 3 years now, ever since Dad and I moved here after Mum passed away. These morning rides kept me connected to Mum. She's the one who taught me to ride. Mrs. Davenport, meanwhile, stomped down her perfectly manicured lawn in her fuzzy slippers. "Look at what that beast is doing to our road. Hoof marks everywhere. Do you have any idea how much we pay for road maintenance in this neighborhood?" I glanced down at the spotless asphalt. Thunder's shoes barely left a trace. "The road looks fine to me, Mrs. Davenport. And besides, this is a public road, not private HOA property. Don't you get smart with me, young lady." Her voice got even shriller. "I'm on the HOA board, and we have rules about livestock. This isn't some plum." By now, 3 neighbors had poked their heads out their front doors, watching our exchange. Interestingly, Mr. Garcia from across the street gave me a subtle thumbs up behind Mrs. Davenport's back. "Thunder isn't livestock. He's my pet and my riding companion," I explained calmly, though my heart was pounding. "And I've checked with the city. Horseback riding is completely legal on all public roads." Mrs. Davenport's face turned the color of a ripe tomato. "We'll see about that," she declared, yanking her phone from her bathrobe pocket. "I'm calling Mr. Henderson right now. He'll put a stop to this nonsense." "Great." Mr. Henderson, the HOA president who once sent my dad a 7-page letter about the height of our grass being a 1/4 of an inch too tall. "Feel free," I said, gently nudging Thunder forward. "Have a nice day, Mrs. Davenport." As we trotted away, I heard her furiously jabbing at her phone screen and spitting words into it. "Arthur, it's Helen Davenport. That Miller girl is riding her horse through the neighborhood again. We need to do something immediately." Mr. Garcia stepped off his porch and approached as I passed. "Don't let her bother you, Abby," he said quietly. "Some people just need something to complain about." "Thanks, Mr. Garcia." Thunder and I try to be respectful. "I know you do. My granddaughter loves watching you ride by each morning. Reminds her of the horses back in Texas." I smiled genuinely this time. "Maybe she can pet Thunder sometime. She'd love that." Happily, the rest of our ride was peaceful. Birds chirping, sprinklers hissing on lawns, and Thunder's steady hoofbeats creating a soothing rhythm. Dad was already gone when I got home. His job at City Hall kept him busy, especially lately with some big project he wouldn't tell me about. I unsaddled Thunder and gave him fresh water and hay in our small but completely legal backyard stable. Dad had made sure everything was up to code before we built it, knowing how picky the HOA could be. After showering and changing for school, I grabbed a granola bar from the kitchen. That's when I spotted it. A cream-colored envelope stuck in our screen door with ICE violation notice printed in bold red letters. I ripped it open, my stomach knotting as I read, "Dear Miller family, it has come to the attention of the Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association that you are in violation of Covenant 7.42. No livestock, poultry, or other animals, except common household pets, shall be kept on any lot or common areas. Your continued housing and parading of a horse through our community streets constitutes a serious violation of community standards. You are hereby ordered to remove said livestock within 48 hours or face a $500 initial fine, followed by $100 daily penalties. Additionally, riding horses on community streets is strictly prohibited, effective immediately. Regards, Arthur Henderson, HOA President. My hands shook as I read it again. Thunder wasn't going anywhere. This was our home. He was family. I pulled out my phone to call Dad, but got his voicemail. Hi, you've reached Robert Miller. I'm unavailable right now, but leave a message and I'll call back as soon as possible. Dad, the HOA left a notice saying we have to get rid of Thunder in 48 hours. They're trying to fine us $500. Please call me back. I don't know what to do. I grabbed my backpack, my mind racing as I walked to the bus stop. Predictably, Mrs. Davenport stood in her driveway, smirking at me with her arms crossed. Next to her was Mr. Henderson, his bald head gleaming in the sunlight as he watched me with narrowed eyes. "Your little pony show is over," Mrs. Davenport called out. "This is a respectable neighborhood, not a barnyard." I kept walking, pretending not to hear, but my eyes stung with angry tears. They couldn't take Thunder away from me. They just couldn't. What would Mrs. Davenport try next? I slammed my locker shut so hard that Chloe jumped beside me. "Whoa! What's wrong with you today?" "The HOA is trying to make me get rid of Thunder," I said, blinking back tears. "They left a notice with some garbage about livestock not being allowed." Chloe's eyes widened. "What? But you've had Thunder for years. Your dad checked all the rules before you moved in, right?" "Of course he did." I pulled out the crumpled notice from my pocket. "Look at this. They're threatening to fine us $500, then $100 every day after that." Chloe scanned the paper, her freckled face growing angrier by the second. "This is so stupid and totally unfair. I know. I tried calling Dad, but he's in meetings all day. He's been super busy with some big project at City Hall." The warning bell rang, and we hurried to class. All day, I couldn't focus on anything the teachers said. My mind kept circling back to Thunder, to Mrs. Davenport's smug face, to the thought of losing my horse, my connection to Mom. When the final bell rang, I raced home, praying Dad would be there. The house was empty. On the kitchen counter sat a note. "Working late again. Pizza money in the usual spot. Don't worry about the HOA. I'll handle it tomorrow. Love, Dad." I crumpled the note. How could he be so calm? The HOA was threatening to take Thunder away in less than 48 hours. My phone buzzed with a text from Chloe. "OMG, check the neighborhood Facebook page now." I opened the app and felt my stomach drop. Mrs. Davenport had created a post with a blurry picture of Thunder and me riding down the street. The caption read, "Health hazard in our neighborhood. The Miller family is keeping a horse in their backyard and allowing it to defecate on our roads. Property values plummeting. Children at risk of disease. Emergency HOA meeting tonight at 7:00 p.m. and at the Henderson residence to address this crisis." Predictably, the comment section was a war zone. "This is outrageous. My daughter has allergies." Linda Evans. "I pay too much in HOA fees to live next to a farm." Arthur Henderson, using his official profile. "Has anyone reported this to animal control?" Helen Davenport. "But thankfully, there were defenders too. That girl takes excellent care of her horse. This is ridiculous." Miguel Garcia. "The Millers checked all the permits before building that small stable. It's fully legal." Megan Kim. Pretty sure public roads aren't HOA jurisdiction anyway. David Reed. My hands shook with anger as I dialed Dad again. Straight to voicemail. I paced the kitchen, trying to think. Then I remembered. Dad kept a file of all our property documents in his home office. Maybe there was something in there that could help. I dug through his meticulously organized filing cabinet until I found a folder labeled Property Willow Creek. Inside were the closing documents, permits for the stable construction, and, jackpot, a complete copy of the HOA covenants with Dad's highlighting and notes in the margins. I flipped to section 7.4.2 about animals. Dad had highlighted the exact line they quoted in their notice and written in the margin, horses exempt, City Ordinance 14.3, which supersedes HOA regulations. Confirmed with City Attorney May 15, 21. Next to this was a sticky note with a phone number and the name Jessica Barnes, City Attorney. My heart raced. Dad had already checked this. The HOA couldn't ban thunder. The city rules protected us. I grabbed my phone to take pictures of the documents when headlights swept across the living room windows. A group of cars was parking outside the Henderson house across the street. The emergency HOA meeting was starting. Without thinking, I grabbed the file, shoved it in my backpack, and marched across the street. My hands were sweaty, my heart pounding, but I wasn't going to let them decide Thunder's fate without me there. I rang the Hendersons' doorbell. Mrs. Henderson answered, her pinched face registering surprise when she saw me. "Abby, what are you doing here?" "I'm here for the HOA meeting about my horse," I said firmly. "Since it concerns me directly, I should be present." "Well," she hesitated, "this is for homeowners only, and you're just—" "My father owns our home," I interrupted. "He's working late, so I'm here representing our family's interests." Mr. Garcia appeared behind Mrs. Henderson. "The girl has a right to be here, Martha. Let her in." Mrs. Henderson reluctantly stepped aside. I entered a living room filled with about 20 neighbors seated on folding chairs. Mrs. Davenport sat in the front row, glaring at me. Mr. Henderson stood at a small podium set up in the corner. "Ah, Abigail Miller," Mr. Henderson said with fake politeness. "How interesting that you've joined us. We were just discussing the horse situation." "His name is Thunder," I said, walking to the front of the room, "and I have information relevant to this discussion." Mrs. Davenport jumped up. "This is outrageous. She's not a homeowner. She can't just barge in here." "Let her speak," Mr. Garcia interrupted. Several others nodded. I took a deep breath and opened Dad's file. The HOA notice claims that keeping a horse violates Covenant 7.4.2. However, Willow Creek falls under City Ordinance 14.3, which specifically allows horses on residential properties that meet proper stable requirements, which our property does. I held up the permit for our stable. This was approved by both the city and the HOA Architectural Committee 2 years ago. Mr. Henderson adjusted his glasses. "Well, that may be, but riding the horse through the neighborhood is still also protected," I continued, gaining confidence. City Ordinance 14.3 specifically states that horses are permitted on all public roadways within city limits. The roads in Willow Creek Estates are public roads maintained by city taxes, not private HOA property. Murmurs spread through the room. Mrs. Davenport's face turned crimson. "Furthermore," we added, "I've been riding Thunder through this neighborhood for 3 years without a single complaint until yesterday. I always clean up after him, respect traffic rules, and keep to the roadway." "The issue isn't just the mess," Mrs. Davenport snapped. "It's the safety hazard. What if that beast goes wild and tramples someone?" "Thunder is a professionally trained quarter horse," I replied calmly. "He's more predictable than most drivers in this neighborhood." A few people chuckled. Mrs. Davenport looked ready to explode. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. Regardless of city ordinances, the HOA has the right to create more restrictive covenants for the good of the community. The board will vote on this issue now. Actually, came a new voice from the doorway, you don't have that right when it conflicts with city law. Everyone turned. There stood Dad, still in his work suit, looking exhausted but determined. Behind him was a woman in a professional blazer holding a leather portfolio. "Robert?" Mrs. Davenport gasped. "We were just having a friendly discussion about—" "I heard everything, Helen," Dad said flatly, "and I've brought Jessica Barnes, the city attorney, to clarify a few legal points for the HOA board." The room went silent. Mr. Henderson's smug expression faltered. "What exactly are you planning, Robert?" Mrs. Davenport demanded, her voice shaking slightly. Dad smiled at me proudly before turning back to the room. "That's an excellent question, Helen. One that I think everyone here will find very interesting." My phone buzzed non-stop with alerts. I nearly dropped it when I saw what was happening. Indeed, Mrs. Davenport had turned me into public enemy number one overnight. The neighborhood page had exploded with angry comments. There I was, in blurry photos with thunder, looking like some kind of criminal. Mrs. Davenport had written, "Urgent alert. Property values dropping as livestock roams freely through our streets." She'd even added close-up pictures of hoof prints on the road like they were evidence in a murder case. My stomach knotted as I scrolled through the comments. Mr. Henderson, with his official HOA profile picture, had announced, "Emergency HOA meeting tonight at 7 p.m. This situation will be addressed once and for all. All concerned homeowners should attend." Then came the flood of angry neighbors. "My son has severe allergies. What if he has a reaction?" wrote Mrs. Evans, whose son I'd seen eating peanut butter sandwiches at the park. "I pay too much in HOA fees to live next to a farm. What's next? Chickens and goats roaming around?" added Mr. Sullivan, who I'd helped last summer when his car broke down. "This isn't some country back road. We have standards here," commented someone I'd never even met. I slumped onto my bed, hurt washing over me. These were people who'd waved to me for years, people who'd complimented Thunder and asked to pet him. But then I noticed something else. Encouragingly, not everyone was against me. "That road is public property according to city maps. The HOA doesn't own it," wrote Mr. Abernathy, the retired lawyer from the corner house. "I've watched this girl ride for years. She's careful, responsible, and cleans up after her horse. What exactly is the problem here?" asked Mr. Garcia, my high school biology teacher. "Since when does the HOA control who uses public roads? I checked our bylaws, and there's nothing about horses," commented Mrs. Jackson, who'd lived here even longer than we had. My spirits lifted slightly. I wasn't alone. I grabbed my phone and called Dad, needing his advice more than ever. Straight to voicemail again. "Dad, there's a huge problem with the HOA. Mrs. Davenport is turning everyone against me and Thunder. They're having an emergency meeting tonight. Please call me back as soon as you can." I hung up, feeling tears threatening. Dad had been so busy with his mysterious project lately, always in meetings, always on calls, barely home. I missed how he used to handle neighborhood issues with calm confidence. I needed to do something. I couldn't just sit here while they decided my fate. Consequently, I pulled out my laptop and started researching. If the roads were public, surely there were rules about this. City ordinances, property maps, something I could use. 2 hours later, I had printed copies of city maps clearly showing the roads as public property, screenshots of city ordinances that mentioned nothing about banning horses, and even historical photos of our town showing horses on these very streets decades ago. I texted Chloe, "Can you come over? HOA drama getting serious?" She arrived 20 minutes later with a chocolate milkshake and fierce loyalty. I saw the posts. Mrs. Davenport is on a power trip. We spread my research across the kitchen table. I think I should go to that meeting, I said. Chloe looked doubtful. They didn't invite you. Mr. Henderson might just kick you out. They're talking about me. I have a right to defend myself, I insisted, though my confidence was shaky. Confronting the entire HOA board and angry neighbors made my stomach churn. What about recording a video? Chloe suggested. Post your side of the story. Show your research. I bet most people haven't even thought about whether the HOA can actually do this. It was a brilliant idea. We spent the next hour filming and editing a calm, fact-based response. I showed the city maps, explained how I'd always been respectful of neighbors, and questioned whether the HOA had authority over public roads. At 6:45 p.m., just as we posted the video, Chloe looked out the window. Whoa, big turnout. I joined her at the living room window. At least 30 neighbors were filing into Mr. Henderson's oversized colonial house across the street. I recognized most of them. The same people who asked about thunder at the mailbox or commented on what a beautiful day it was for riding. Now, they were gathering to ban us. Your video already has comments, Chloe said, checking her phone. People are sharing it. My own phone buzzed with a text from Mr. Abernathy. Good research, stay strong. For the next hour, we watched the meeting through Mr. Henderson's large front windows. We couldn't hear anything, but the body language told a story. Mrs. Davenport stood several times, pointing and gesturing dramatically. Mr. Henderson kept nodding and writing things down. Some neighbors looked uncomfortable, others angry. At 8:30 p.m., people began leaving. Several checked their phones, possibly seeing my video for the first time. A few glanced toward our house with expressions I couldn't read. I think it's over, Chloe said. Maybe they'll just send another stupid letter. That's when we heard the sirens. Blue and red lights flashed as 2 police cars pulled up directly in front of our house. Mrs. Davenport emerged from Mr. Henderson's house, pointing triumphantly toward us. They called the cops, Chloe whispered, incredulous, for riding a horse? My heart pounded as officers stepped out of their vehicles. This wasn't just HOA drama anymore. Through the window, I watched Mr. Henderson hurry across the street, holding a thick binder probably filled with HOA rules I'd supposedly broken. The doorbell rang, and my legs felt like jelly as I went to answer it. What are we going to do? Chloe asked, eyes wide. I took a deep breath and reached for the door. Stand our ground. 2 police officers stood at my door, their badges gleaming under the porch light. Behind them, Mrs. Davenport watched with her arms crossed, a smug smile on her face. Mr. Henderson clutched his HOA binder like it was made of gold. Neighbors lingered on sidewalks, pretending not to stare, but missing nothing. Are you the owner of the Brown Quarter horse? The taller officer asked, his voice serious but not unkind. My mouth went dry. Yes, that's Thunder. He's mine. Is something wrong? Chloe squeezed my arm, standing beside me like a shield. We've received multiple complaints about unauthorized livestock creating hazards on neighborhood roads, he explained, flipping open a small notebook. The HOA president has provided documentation of repeated violations after several warnings were issued. Mrs. Davenport stepped forward, uninvited. She's been defying HOA rules for weeks. Just this morning, she rode that massive animal right past my house, knowing full well. The second officer raised his hand politely. Ma'am, please let us handle this. My racing heart steadied a bit. At least they weren't just taking her side automatically. Officer, I said, pulling out the folder of research I'd prepared earlier, I've been riding Thunder on these roads for 3 years without any problems. The roads are public property, according to these city maps. The HOA doesn't have authority over public roads. I handed him the maps, my hands trembling slightly. Mr. Henderson pushed forward. That's completely irrelevant. Our HOA covenants clearly state in Section 7.3 that no livestock is permitted on community property, which includes all roads within Willow Creek Estates. The officer accepted my maps and glanced at them while his partner took Mr. Henderson's binder. Furthermore, Mrs. Davenport added, her voice rising, that horse is a health hazard. My property values are plummeting. I've already spoken with my realtor. Several neighbors had edged closer, forming a small crowd on our front lawn. I recognized faces from both sides of the neighborhood page argument. Mr. Abernathy was there too, watching carefully with his arms crossed. I always clean up after thunder, I explained to the officers. I've never left anything on the road, and I only ride early in the morning when there's barely any traffic. The second officer was flipping through Mr. Henderson's binder with a furrowed brow. There are a lot of rules in here. Of course there are, Mr. Henderson said proudly. We maintain the highest standards in Willow Creek Estates. More neighbors had arrived, drawn by the police presence. Some were filming with their phones. My face burned with embarrassment and anger. This was so unfair. I'm going to need to see proof that these roads are actually HOA property, the first officer said to Mr. Henderson, because according to these city maps, they appear to be city-maintained public roads. Mrs. Davenport's smile faltered. Well, that's just a technicality. Our HOA rules still apply to everyone in the neighborhood. Actually, Mr. Abernathy spoke up, stepping forward from the crowd, HOA rules can only govern private property within the association, not public roads maintained by city taxes. Whispers rippled through the growing audience. I've lived here 26 years, a woman called out. People used to ride horses here all the time before Mrs. Davenport moved in. My kids love seeing that horse, another neighbor added. Mrs. Davenport's face reddened. This isn't about whether it's cute. It's about rules and property values and safety. The first officer held up his hands. Folks, please, let's keep this civil. I'd like to see the city ordinance that prohibits horses on public roads, I said, finding my courage, because I researched it today and there isn't one. The officers exchanged glances. The second one shrugged slightly. Mr. Henderson thrust his finger toward me. The HOA supersedes. No, it doesn't, interrupted Mr. Abernathy. I practiced law for 40 years. HOAs cannot override city ordinances or restrict activities on public property. A murmur of agreement spread through some of the neighbors. Additionally, I continued, pulling out more paperwork, I found these historical photographs in the City Library digital archives showing horses on these exact streets from the town's founding until about 10 years ago. Willow Creek was famous for its horse farms. I handed the printed photos to the officers, who studied them with interest. Mrs. Davenport stepped closer, her voice lowered but still sharp. Officer, are you really going to let a teenager tell you how to do your job? The HOA voted unanimously tonight. That horse is banned from our roads. The first officer looked uncomfortable. Ma'am, we enforce city ordinances, not HOA rules, but to keep the peace. He turned to me with an apologetic expression. I'm going to have to ask you not to ride your horse in the neighborhood anymore until this dispute is resolved properly. What? I gasped. But I haven't broken any laws. It's just temporary, he explained, until the HOA and you can come to an agreement or get official clarification from the city. That could take months, I protested, feeling tears threatening. Mr. Henderson smiled triumphantly. We'll be sending formal violation notices tomorrow. The second officer was still reviewing documents. I'm not seeing an actual city ordinance prohibiting horses. Show me one that says I can't ride my horse on a public road, I challenged, my voice stronger than I felt. Not an HOA rule, an actual city law. The officers looked at each other again, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. There isn't one, said a new voice, clear and confident. The crowd parted as someone walked up our driveway. My heart leaped. Dad! My father strode toward us, still wearing his business suit, his briefcase in hand. He looked tired, but determined. "Mr. Miller," Mrs. Davenport said, her voice suddenly honey-sweet. "We're simply enforcing the rules that everyone agreed to when they moved here." Dad nodded politely to the officers, then turned to Mrs. Davenport and Mr. Henderson. "I apologize for being absent during this situation. I've been extremely busy with work." "Then, work that kept you from answering my calls all day?" I couldn't help asking, hurt mixing with relief. "Important work," he said, giving me a meaningful look before addressing the officers. "Officers, I appreciate you responding to the neighborhood's concerns, but there seems to be some confusion about jurisdiction here." He pulled out his own folder, thicker than mine, and handed it to the first officer. "What's this?" the officer asked, opening it. "A complete survey of Willow Creek Estates, showing which roads are public and which are private, certified by the city engineer's office this afternoon. Also included is a legal opinion from the city attorney regarding HOA jurisdiction over public spaces." Mrs. Davenport's face drained of color. "How did you get those documents so quickly?" Dad ignored her question. "You'll find that our street, along with most roads in this neighborhood, are fully public and maintained by city taxes." Mr. Henderson stepped forward. "This doesn't change anything. Our HOA covenants clearly state covenants that were last updated 7 years ago and never properly filed with the county recorder's office," Dad interrupted calmly. "I discovered that oversight this afternoon as well." The whispers in the crowd grew louder. "Dad, where have you been?" I asked again, completely confused. "What's going on?" He put his arm around my shoulders. "I've been busy, sweetheart. Very busy." "Mr. Miller," the first officer said carefully, "these documents appear official, but I'm not sure how they help resolve the situation tonight." Dad smiled. "Officers, I'd like to introduce myself properly. As of 3:00 p.m. today, I was sworn in as the new mayor of Willow Creek." Gasps erupted from the neighbors. Mrs. Davenport's mouth fell open. Mr. Henderson dropped his precious binder, papers scattering across our front lawn. "Mayor?" I whispered, stunned. "That's your big project?" Dad squeezed my shoulder. "Surprise. You need to come inside right now," Dad said, his voice surprisingly firm as he walked past the police officers. Their faces showed confusion as they looked between Dad and me. Mrs. Davenport and Mr. Henderson stood frozen on our lawn, their mouths hanging open. I'd never seen my father look so powerful. His usual tired smile was replaced with something that made even the officers straighten their backs. "Officers, Mrs. Davenport, Mr. Henderson, I believe we need to have a conversation about jurisdiction and authority," Dad said, holding our front door open. "My living room would be more comfortable than standing in this heat." The police officers exchanged glances. One of them shrugged. Mrs. Davenport clutched her designer purse like it might shield her from whatever was happening inside our house. Nobody wanted to sit first. Dad moved to his favorite armchair and nodded toward the couch. "Please, make yourselves comfortable." "Mr. Miller, with all due respect," the first officer began, "we received multiple complaints about—" "Before we continue this discussion," Dad interrupted, sliding a folder across our coffee table, "you should probably know that as of 3 p.m. today, I was officially sworn in as the new mayor of Willow Creek." The room went completely silent. I could hear our old grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. That's impossible," Mr. Henderson finally managed, his face turning an alarming shade of red. "Mayor Evans was just at our HOA fundraiser last weekend, and he announced his resignation the very next day," Dad replied calmly. "Health reasons. The special election results were certified this afternoon." Interestingly, I've spent the past 6 months campaigning quietly while researching something very specific: the legal boundaries between city authority and homeowners associations. Mrs. Davenport's knuckles turned white around her purse straps. "You can't just waltz in and—" "Actually, I can," Dad said, opening the folder. Officer Davis, Officer Reynolds, I believe you'll find this interesting. This is the official city attorney's legal opinion, completed last week, confirming that no HOA in Willow Creek has any jurisdiction whatsoever over public roads. He handed the document to the officers, who leaned together to read it. Furthermore, Dad continued, pulling out a faded, official-looking document protected in a plastic sleeve, horseback riding is explicitly protected under our city's founding charter from 1892, when Willow Creek was established as a horse-breeding community. This protection has never been removed or amended. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Dad had never mentioned running for mayor, not once. Mrs. Davenport found her voice. This is ridiculous. The damage those horses do to our roads has been thoroughly investigated, Dad cut in. My second act as mayor was to request a complete assessment from our Public Works Department. He pulled out another document with photos attached. Their report confirms no damage has occurred from occasional horseback riding. Dad turned to the officers. However, they did document these unauthorized "No Horses Allowed" signs that Mrs. Davenport has been placing on public property without permits. Each one is a $500 violation of city code. Mrs. Davenport's face drained of all color. You set this whole thing up, Mr. Henderson accused, pointing a shaking finger at Dad. You've been planning this. Dad leaned forward. No, Arthur. You and Helen set this up when you decided that your HOA rules somehow superseded city law, when you harassed my daughter for doing something completely legal, when you called the police instead of having a simple conversation. The officers had finished reading the documents. Officer Davis cleared his throat. So, to be clear, there's no actual violation regarding the horse. None whatsoever, Dad confirmed. My daughter and her horse have every right to use any public road in this city. Mr. Henderson stood up suddenly. This isn't over, Miller, Dad smiled. Actually, it is. And before you leave, he handed Mr. Henderson another document. The City Council will be conducting a comprehensive review of all HOA covenants for compliance with city ordinances next month. I'd strongly suggest you start your own review before then. Officer Reynolds looked almost impressed. Congratulations on your election, Mayor Miller. Thank you, officer. I hope next time we meet under more pleasant circumstances. As they all walked toward the door, I noticed something strange. A small group of neighbors had gathered on the sidewalk watching, and one of them was recording everything on her phone. Dad, I whispered, did you tell them to be here? He just winked at me as Mrs. Davenport pushed through the small crowd, her face burning with humiliation. I can't believe you kept this a secret, I said after everyone left. Dad sighed, suddenly looking tired again. I wasn't sure I'd win, didn't want to get your hopes up, but once I saw what was happening with Thunder, I knew I had to try. So you became mayor? Just to help me keep riding my horse? I asked, feeling a mix of shock and love. Dad laughed and pulled me into a hug. No, honey, he said. I became mayor because this town needs someone who cares about what's right, not just what's in some rule book. The horse thing was just good timing. My phone buzzed with notifications. The video was already spreading through the neighborhood group chat. Dad's revelation had become Willow Creek's biggest news. What happens now? I asked, still trying to process everything. Dad loosened his tie and smiled. Now we see if those HOA bullies have learned their lesson, or if they want to find out what else their new mayor has up his sleeve. I woke up to my phone exploding with messages. Predictably, the video of yesterday's showdown had gone viral in our small town. Someone had even made a meme of Mrs. Davenport's face when Dad revealed he was the new mayor. I couldn't stop laughing until a message from Chloe caught my eye. Check the HOA Facebook page now. What I saw made my stomach drop. Mr. Henderson had posted a long message claiming Dad had abused his position and tricked voters just to help his daughter break HOA rules. He called for an emergency town meeting to address this corruption. "Dad!" I yelled, running downstairs with my phone. "You need to see this." Dad was already at the kitchen table, calmly drinking coffee while looking at his laptop. "Already seen it," he said. "Put your riding boots on." "What? But they're trying to—" "Trust me," he said, with a smile that told me he had a plan. "And bring Thunder's favorite brush." 30 minutes later, we rode side by side down our street. Dad on an old mare he borrowed from Mr. Abernathy. Neighbors came out of their houses, some taking pictures, others just watching with curious faces. "Mayor Miller," called Mrs. Peterson from across the street, "is it true what they're saying on the HOA page?" Dad stopped his horse. "Which part? That I know the law better than Mr. Henderson? That's definitely true." People laughed, and I noticed how differently they looked at Dad now, with respect and curiosity, instead of just seeing him as the quiet guy from number 27. We rode toward the neighborhood park, where a crowd had gathered. A news van from the local station sat parked by the entrance. My heart started racing. This wasn't just neighborhood drama anymore. Mr. Henderson stood on a bench, surrounded by a small group of supporters, mostly older residents who'd been on the HOA board for years. Mrs. Davenport stood next to him, arms crossed, face sour. "Here comes the mayor, who thinks laws don't matter," Mr. Henderson shouted when he saw us approaching. Dad dismounted smoothly and handed the reins to me. He walked through the crowd as people made way. "Actually, Arthur," Dad said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "I think laws matter very much. That's why I spent 6 months researching which ones actually apply to our community." He pulled a folded map from his jacket pocket and spread it on a picnic table. People crowded around to see. "This is the original land survey of Willow Creek Estates," Dad explained. "Notice these roads marked in blue? They were established as public bridleways in 1892, specifically for horses to travel between farms. When this development was built in 1995, the builders were required by law to preserve these historical routes." A reporter pushed forward with a microphone. "Mayor Miller, are you saying the HOA has been enforcing illegal restrictions?" "I'm saying," Dad replied carefully, "that our homeowners association has done many good things for our community, but they've also overstepped their authority in several areas. My administration plans to work with them to correct these issues." Mrs. Davenport pushed through the crowd. "You're destroying property values. Who wants to live where horses can just walk anywhere?" An elderly man I didn't recognize stepped forward. "I do," he said firmly. "My grandfather raised horses right where these houses stand. This town was built on horseflesh and hard work, not on fancy rules about what color your mailbox can be." Others nodded in agreement. I realized many of our neighbors were actually on our side. Mr. Henderson wasn't giving up. "The HOA contract you signed clearly states contracts can't override city law," interrupted a woman in a business suit who'd been listening quietly. "I'm Laura Sanchez, city attorney, and Mayor Miller asked me to review your HOA bylaws last month." She held up a document with sections highlighted in bright yellow. "I've identified 17 provisions that violate municipal code, state law, or resident rights." Mr. Henderson looked like he'd swallowed something sour. Mrs. Davenport's face turned an alarming shade of red. "But this isn't just about horses or rules," Dad said, his voice softening. "It's about what kind of community we want to be. Do we want to be neighbors who work together, or people who call the police over hoofprints?" There was a murmur of agreement through the crowd. "That's why," Dad continued, "I'm announcing the creation of the Willow Creek Heritage Trail Project. We'll be restoring the old riding paths throughout town, creating a unique attraction that celebrates our history while giving everyone, horse owners or not, beautiful trails to enjoy. People actually clapped. The reporter looked delighted with this unexpected story. And to kick it off, Dad said, nodding toward the park entrance, I've invited some special guests. I turned to see Chloe riding up on her horse, Midnight. Behind her came Sophia and Noah on borrowed horses from the local stable. And behind them, I couldn't believe my eyes, were at least 20 more riders of all ages, some in Western gear, others in English riding clothes. The Willow Creek Riding Club, Dad explained to the crowd, which hasn't been active since the HOA banned their annual parade 15 years ago. Mr. Abernathy, the oldest resident in our neighborhood, rode at the front of the group. We're mighty happy to be back, he called out, tipping his cowboy hat. For the next hour, kids got pony rides, adults asked questions about the Heritage Trail project, and reporters interviewed everyone. Even some HOA board members quietly told Dad they supported his plans. Mr. Henderson eventually slunk away, but Mrs. Davenport stubbornly stayed, watching everything with narrowed eyes. As the crowd thinned, she approached me while I was brushing Thunder. Your father won't be mayor forever, she said quietly, and some of us have long memories. I kept brushing Thunder calmly. Mrs. Davenport, do you know why I ride every morning? She blinked, surprised by my question. Because it makes me happy, I said simply. Wouldn't it be nice if we all focused on things that make us happy instead of trying to stop others from enjoying their lives? She didn't answer, just turned and walked away. 3 weeks later, the first section of the Heritage Trail opened with a ribbon-cutting ceremony. Mr. Henderson didn't attend, but 5 other HOA board members did. Dad says they've been surprisingly helpful since they realized fighting the mayor and public opinion was a losing battle. The local newspaper ran a story about Willow Creek's horse-friendly revival that got picked up by state media. Surprisingly, tourism has actually increased, with people coming to ride our trails and learn about the town's history. Yesterday, I saw something I never expected. Mrs. Davenport, walking slowly along the trail with a little girl about 7 years old. The child pointed excitedly at Thunder in our paddock. That's him. That's the famous horse from the video, Grandma. Mrs. Davenport noticed me watching and gave a stiff nod. My granddaughter is visiting for the weekend, she said reluctantly. She wants to know if she could pet your horse. The little girl looked up at me with hopeful eyes. Actually, I said, smiling at her, would you like a riding lesson instead? The girl's face lit up like Christmas morning. Even Mrs. Davenport's expression softened, just a tiny bit. Dad says sometimes the best revenge is helping your enemies see the world through new eyes. I'm not sure Mrs. Davenport will ever fully change, but watching her hold her granddaughter steady on Thunder's back while the little girl giggled with joy, well, that felt better than winning any fight. This story highlights that standing up for what's right often requires more than just passion. It demands preparation, facts, and understanding the rules, sometimes better than those trying to enforce them. Furthermore, it shows that true community strength lies not in rigid adherence to arbitrary regulations, but in respecting individual rights, embracing local history, and finding common ground, even with those you disagree with. Sometimes the quietest people have the biggest impact, and leading by example can pave the way for surprising reconciliation. What would you have done if you were Abby or her dad? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel for more.